What's up, guys? Your boy, 22K13. I'm going to talk about 10 WWE superstars that TNA unsuccessfully tried to sign. This comes from WhatCulture.com. To this very day, TNA President Dixie Carter still has to spend time swatting away criticism of her company's predilection toward WWE aspect. In her defense, though, the issue is nowhere near as prominent as it was 5 or so years back. Nonetheless, the list of WWE cast-offs populating TNA rank is still a rather lengthy one, including the likes of Kurt Angle, The Hardy, MVP, Lashley, Mr. Anderson, Drew Galloway, EC3, and Tyrus. But if TNA had gotten their way, the company's former WWE fraternity might have been boasting even greater numbers still. Over the years, the Tennessee-based enterprise has made many an overture for former WWE personnel, with one such example happening as recently as this week. Make no mistake, this article isn't intended to be yet another internet-based bashing of TNA. It stands to reason that as the premier company in pro wrestling, the WWE talent is of a very high standard, and who wouldn't want such quality on their roster. But either way, the list of stars that TNA has unsuccessfully approached makes for interesting reading nonetheless. This article assembles that very list and brings to you 10 former WWE superstars that TNA attempted to sign. Number 10. Rey Mysterio. News broke earlier this week that TNA had made a very recent attempt to sign former WWE champion and our own future Hall of Famer Rey Mysterio. Given the luchador story history with WWE, it's hard to imagine him stepping foot in the six-sided ring, but TNA clearly felt they had a good chance of turning that image into a reality. A business case assembled by Carter and John Gaburek was pitched to Ray drawn on the increased visibility that TNA could provide for his merchandise. But with his net worth standing at an estimated $8.5 million, it seemed highly unlikely that Ray would be in any great need of boosting his merch sales. The offer also included the promise of being built as a major star and having the flexibility to work anywhere he chooses on day off from TV taping. But the smart money will still be on Ray heading to Lucha Underground, where he can reinvest his time into giving something back to the next generation of Lucha Libre sensation. Number 9. Alberto Del Rio. And speaking of Lucha Underground, another ex-WWE star that TNA made a move for was none other than Alberto El Patron, or Alberto Del Rio, as he was known under Vince McMahon, having been infamously fired for slapping an employee that he claimed was racially abusive. Alberto was still a big name in the business at the time of his WWE departure, and that presented an opportunity that TNA couldn't refuse. Wrestling Inc. once again reported via Dave Meltzer that TNA offered Alberto a $400,000 deal for a minimal date that would have seen the Mexican aristocrat appear on the premiere episode of Impact Wrestling on Destination America. The reason Alberto declined the offer was allegedly because of poor perception of TNA within the industry, though Meltzer was a little more direct with his wording. But nonetheless, it seemed like a very similar situation to that of Mysterio. Having been earning a salary of as much as $625,000, he hardly needs TNA money. while the lure of returning to his lucha root was clearly too good to resist. Number 8. Gene Snitsky. Though not quite as big a star as Alberto Del Rio, Gene Snitsky was nevertheless in cahoots with TNA as recently as this time last year. In fact, he even featured on Impact for a few weeks as a part of Dixie's resume. However, he didn't stick around for too long, which suggests that it was TNA who let him go, rather than Snitsky opting to move on. In many ways, that would suggest that this wasn't a case of TNA unsuccessfully approaching a former WWE guy, merely an instance of them choosing not to pursue that approach further. However, it was later revealed that one of Snitsky's few segments on TNA TV just so happened to be the highest rated segment that the company had seen in months. Sure, that likely wasn't all Snitsky doing, but it does suggest that by ultimately passing up on retaining Snitsky's service, TNA business dealing could once again be deemed somewhat unsuccessful. Number 7. Ezekiel Jackson. And Snitsky wasn't alone when he appeared for TNA last summer, as he was joined by fellow WWE alumni, the Man Mountain Ezekiel Jackson. Jackson had arguably been the more successful of the two, having captained the Intercontinental and ECW Championship during his 7 years with the company, but that obviously didn't matter a great deal to TNA, as they allowed him to endure a similar fate to Snitsky. Of course, as well as that earlier business of the highest rated segment in months, Jackson has since gone on to sign for Lucha Underground, where he worked under the rather appropriate name Big Rick. Far from being one of the promotion's top stars, he's nonetheless a very useful and diverse addition to the Lucha Underground roster, suggesting that his signing may well have been another smart piece of business had TNA pushed ahead with it. Number 6. Christian. This entry may not involve evidence of a concrete offer from TNA, but it was still a strong signal of intent from the company in acquiring a WWE talent. During a Q&A session in Glasgow, Scotland, Dickie Carter answered questions from assembled journalists and fans. Her answers were apparently very calm, cool, and collected, until a question was posed asking which wrestler she would most like to see in to TNA. She responded immediately with Christian Cage, and even though this was a hypothetical question, there's a good chance that her enthusiasm was an attempt by Dixie to lure Christian from WWE obscurity and back to the company that helped him move on to the main event. Of course, this is all pure speculation, but given the speed with which he answered the question, not to mention Christian's unclear status with the WWE, many were left wondering whether this was a publicity stunt or saturated by Dixie and the hope of seizing Captain Charisma attention. Mind you, it clearly failed either way. Number 5. Carlito. Another superstar who, despite no concrete evidence of an approach, had been linked with an offer from TNA in the past is Carlito. The Puerto Rican had a very decorated stint in the WWE, winning 3 tag titles as well as Intercontinental and United States Gold, but he seemed very averse to adding any TNA accolade to that haul. Regarding a move to the company, he wrote on Twitter, and I quote, "I don't know why I haven't gone there. They just haven't inspired me. Now can we please stop asking me that too?" Again, there's no discernible evidence of TNA making a formal offer, but the perceived apparition in Carlito's tweet suggests that this is a topic that has been broached more than once before. Rather than follow in the footsteps of various former colleges, Carlito is instead choosing to spend his days competing in his homeland with the World Wrestling Council, the organization owned by his father, Carlo Colon Sr. Number 4. Shelton Benjamin. But while Carlito may have had no interest in a move to TNA, the same cannot quite be said for Shelton Benjamin, the gold standard who of memory created a handful of memories in a number of ladder matches while on WWE payroll, recently opened up about his discussion with the company, noting that both parties were eager to do business. Unfortunately, though, he told of how they were unable to reach a mutually satisfactory agreement in a series of highly accurately tweets. As disappointed as he sounds, though, he still got plenty of work on the table in Asia with New Japan Pro Wrestling and back in the US with Global Force Wrestling. Considering how respectfully and fondly Benjamin spoke of TNA, though, don't be surprised as this one eventually comes to fruition at some point later down the line. Number 3. John Morrison. Today, John Morrison is wowing audience in Lucha Underground under the ally Johnny Mundo. But if TNA had gotten their way, when it could have been a very different story indeed. Wrestling Inc. report on an interview that Morrison carried out in which he mentioned his discussion with TNA. He admitted that he had helped talk with the company. However, the fact that he lived in LA and that TNA TV taping goes down in Florida is quite the stumbling block. Morrison did talk favorably about the company, though, so much like the situation with Benjamin. A deal in the future may not be completely out of the question. And for TNA, any such deal would likely prove to be a very good piece of business. Morrison has the potential to become a huge star in WWE, as he is now proven in Lucha Underground, so it seems perfectly natural that Disney and company will want to cash in on Morrison. Incredibly ability, and his ever improving star power. Number 2, Edge. In one of the more orthodox instances on this list, TNA made the rather ambitious decision to approach WWE Hall of Famer Edge about joining their operation. The idea was said to be for Edge to fill the position of on-screen authority figure, a role recently vacated by Kurt Angle, who had made the decision to return to in-ring competition. But unfortunately for TNA, talk didn't really get very far at all. Although the move is described as a big money offer, it seemed that the side did not even get around to discussing any financial aspect. Per WrestleZone, the situation was described as TNA putting out the feelers and the fish didn't bite. Edge's pleasant acting career is likely the main reason behind his reluctance to negotiate, though. His relationship with the WWE was probably another huge factor. Edge remained on good terms with the company and still make appearances from time to time. This it seemed a little odd that TNA even made an approach in the first place. and number 1, CM Punk. But perhaps the most amazing approach that TNA have unsuccessfully made for a former WWE star is that which took place at the end of last year when they made a play for CM Punk, as reported by Wrestling Inc. This was done similar to how they reached out to Alberto Del Rio through an intermediary who is friends with Punk. The idea pitch was said to be a huge deal for Punk to be the top star of the company with pay similar to what Hulk Hogan was making. The idea is that Punk could be TNA flagship star, and if he signed now, he could help get a strong TV deal. Punk reportedly expressed no interest in working in pro wrestling again. As sensational as this would have been, it's really no great surprise. Punk has been extremely vocal in his disinterest in returning to the world of professional wrestling, and as is now common knowledge, he had a rather different career path on his mind. Much like the situation with Edge, though, credit to TNA for trying, and no matter how far-fetched it may have been, can you imagine how Vince would have reacted had this signing ever materialized? Well, that's it, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. See you guys on the next one. Peace.